Hello and welcome to the channel. Today what I wanted to talk about, and what we've got to get into first if we're getting into map reading and how to apply that on our hikes and our backpacking trips, is how a grid reference system works. Now I'm going to introduce you to the global positioning system before we can break that down into the grid reference system. If we imagine the Earth, it's a sphere, spinning around as well, but it's a sphere. What we have to do is put a grid over that. So what we do is we put vertical lines and horizontal lines all across the Earth at 10-degree intervals. The vertical lines, the ones going from the North Pole to the South Pole, all the way around the Earth, are called longitudinal lines. These longitudinal lines have a 0 point, which is in Greenwich Mean Time. That is actually through the Greenwich Observatory in London. Then, if we go and follow this in 10-degree steps, these lines, all the way around the Earth from north to south, go from 0 at Greenwich Mean Time to 180 at the date line. They also go in the other direction in 10-degree steps. So we've got 10 degrees to the east, 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, up to 180 degrees to the west. Now, how do we differentiate between an easterly and a westerly longitudinal line? Well, this is pretty simple, and I've just given you a very big clue. The ones to the east, the lines going vertical from the North Pole to the South Pole, from the east of Greenwich Mean Time, are called easterlies. What we'd do if we're 20 degrees east of Greenwich Mean Time, we'd have east 20. In the same fashion, if we go to the west, our 20 now becomes a westerly and it's W20. That's just the separation of the Earth in the vertical segments. Now we have to separate it into horizontal segments. These are called meridians, and the 0 meridian is around the equator at the Earth. Then we separate them in 10 degrees, 20 degrees, all the way up to 90 degrees at the North Pole, and similarly 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 90 degrees at the South Pole. What we have to do is differentiate again between north and south, and it becomes rather obvious. The north ones are called northerlies, the southern ones are called southerlies. Now, using this grid reference system, as we've said, we've got our 20 degrees, whether it's an easterly or westerly, and at 20 degrees, 30 degrees, whatever, northerly or southerly. How do we apply this? On our global positioning systems, on our Garmins or whatever we're using for hiking, they will list the northerlies first, or the southerlies. So they're listing the latitude first, how far you are away from the equator, followed by the distance you are, or the degrees you are, away from Greenwich Mean Time. This only applies to global reference systems and GPS systems. Northerlies first, so latitude first, then longitude. This just makes it an easier way to reference that in your mind, because we know, for example, that London is perhaps 30 degrees north of the equator. Okay, it's north of the equator, and a certain distance away from Greenwich. This just makes your mind compute it faster. When we actually get to grid references and using the maps, we always use a cross, so we call it, as an easy way to remember, along the corridor, then up the stairs. Completely opposite to how do we use a GPS reference in position. I'm not going into the details of why that is here. I just want you to remember there is a grid around the Earth. It's split into degrees, whether easterly or westerly, whether northerly or southerly, and that gives us an area that we can separate into grids. If we zoom in on those grids, firstly we have degrees, and we separate now that grid that we've zoomed into another grid with horizontal and parallel lines again. We're now separating those degrees into what we call minutes. If we zoom in again, we get degrees, minutes, seconds. This is just a description of how many times we've divided that square up. And if we zoom in, imagine we're on an app and we've zoomed into that grid, then we've got our longitude and our latitude lines exactly the same on that map as if they are around the Earth. We've just divided it into more and more segments. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I'm going to add some graphics so that you can see it and you can apply it in your own brain and learn it. Once you've got this into your mind, then we can start applying this to maps and get into the details of getting grid references and taking grid references from your maps, also choosing the correct maps for your area. Hope this helps and see you soon. Give me a like and subscribe to the channel if you like what we're doing.